Thank you for joining us for the June 19th, 2023 City Council meeting and public hearing. Alpharetta, go ahead and call this meeting to order. Do we know if Councilman Binder will be joining us?
I have not heard from him since this morning. I'll check with him right now and find out for you, but I have not proactively heard from him.
Okay. So for the public record, no need to call. All members of council are present and accounted for. And as always, we begin our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you're able, please stand and join us. So the first item up on our agenda this evening is the consent agenda. And that consists of the City Council meeting minutes from the meeting of May 22nd, 2023, alcoholic beverage license applications. First being PH-23-AB-11, Snoozetown LLC, DBA Snooze, an AM Eatery, 6065 North Point Parkway, Suite 230, Alpharetta, Georgia 30022. And the second being PH-23-AB-12, ERB Holdings Group, LLC, DBA Egg Roll Boys, 5815 Wynwood Parkway, Suite 211, Alpharetta, Georgia 30005. Is there anyone on council that would like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Seeing none, Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
Not for this item, sir.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on this item, now's your chance. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Have a motion by Councilman Will.
Second.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously. So that'll wrap up the consent agenda. We'll move on to the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting. And the first item under public hearing is PH-23-08, UDC Text Amendment Zoning Procedures Law. This is the first reading. Ms. Eswine, I believe you have the floor.
Thank you. An ordinance of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia to amend the Unified Development Code of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia to amend procedures to ensure consistency with the zoning procedures law, to repeal conflicting ordinances, to provide an effective date, and for other lawful purposes. Mayor and Council, last year the General Assembly adopted some changes to the zoning procedures law. So as you know, the local governments of the state are authorized to implement zoning to provide what will go where in the boundaries of each local government, and the General Assembly can't make any law affecting zoning except as to the procedures. And so the zoning procedures law provides minimum standards and procedures that have to be recognized and implemented by local governments when they make their zoning decisions. Up until the change in the law, the zoning procedures law did not affect variances, so we didn't have to provide for the same notice and hearing provisions for variances that are in the code, frankly, and it affected zoning decisions, specifically being when you rezone properties, say from agricultural to industrial. We had to provide, according to the zoning procedures law, at least 15 days notice, not more than 45 days notice in the newspaper, with public hearing, establishing minimum procedures in that way. Same thing for special use or conditional use permits. Depending on what jurisdiction you are, you call them different things. But there were some changes in the law made, largely in recognition of some lack of clarity in case law on how you are to appeal zoning decisions. So I won't get into the weeds with you on that. Just know that it's kind of been in a state of uncertainty how you are to appeal a zoning decision versus certain quasi-judicial decisions. And that led the legislature to take a look at and revisit the zoning procedures law to provide for a more clear path for that. And that is part of the revision, so it doesn't affect your code changes so much. But when the legislature went through and made these changes last year, they broadened the definition of a zoning decision to include variances. And so now we have to provide notice of variance decisions in the same way that we do other zoning decisions. And it provided some enhanced notice provisions. So when you are making a legislative decision under the zoning procedures law, it still is only 15 days notice, or not more than 45 days notice. So for a zoning decision under the ZPL, it's still the same. But for quasi-judicial decisions, it is 30 days notice. You have to provide 30 days notice. It can't be 15. And so that actually reaches more than just variance decisions. And you'll see in the draft that while we've incorporated some of these procedures in for variances and things of that nature, you'll also see it for adult entertainment establishments and the shooting ranges. And that's because things that are quasi-judicial in nature, when you're actually hearing from applicants, taking in evidence, making a decision in that way, kind of acting like a judge, rather than acting in your legislative capacity of adopting law, like adopting a zoning ordinance, we have to provide that 30 days notice. And so that is what the draft in front of you is. We have to adopt the changes to our UDC before July 1st. And so we will meet that time period by having this public hearing and then the second reading on next Monday. But the law that changed requires some other things. In addition to that 30 days notice for quasi-judicial decisions, we have to specifically put in our ordinance how the public hearings are going to be held. One of the things that y'all have always done is basically allow anybody to speak for basically however long they want to during these public hearings. You are certainly still authorized to do that, but I did have to make some changes to the code under the public hearing section to say that each side, the proponents and the opponents, get not less than 10 minutes per side. We have to provide that opportunity. So if there were opposition to come for a rezoning application, or whatever it is, we have to allow them equal time, not less than 10 minutes. You can certainly extend that, but that has to be written in the code. Up until then, we just had to have a policy in place allowing for that, but now that has to actually be codified. So this was presented to the Planning Commission, and they voted unanimously to recommend approval. The draft that they had and the draft that was prepared in conjunction with staff was not to draw that distinction that I was making between an actual rezoning decision and everything else. Even though the law at the state level does and says that a rezoning only has to have 15 days notice, the variances, things like that have to have 30 days. To simplify things for staff, we had prepared a draft that was 30 to 45 days notice across the board so that we wouldn't have to keep track of separate timeframes. But after, and that is the draft that the Planning Commission recommended approval of. But I think staff has spoken with some of you, and there's been some concern about that. And so there are actually two drafts of the code uploaded to the meeting portal. One is for 30 days across the board notice, and then the other is to keep them separate so that the zoning decisions that are more legislative in nature, as authorized by state law, we can still have only 15 days notice for those. That would also include when you, the governing authority of the city, considers variances. Those are still considered legislative and can still have only 15 days notice. So this would be, if you decided to go separately, to have staff keep track of the two different timeframes, anything coming before you could still pretty much be 15 to 45 days as to zoning decisions, including variances. But if it's just a variance that goes to the Board of Appeals, that would still have to be 30 days per the law. And those other decisions that I was explaining that are in the draft, those about the shooting ranges and the adult entertainment establishments, those still have to be 30. But you have the option of making it maybe a little simpler for staff, but providing a little bit more delay on the applicant side of having 30 days across the board, or you can separate it out and have 15 days for some applications and 30 for others. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Eswine. Any questions from council on this item? Mr. Lagerblum, I'm just curious, have we looked to see what the additional cost this may be to advertising these different?
Yeah, so it will probably add to our advertising cost, but no, I have not put a dollar figure to that. I very easily could and can report that back to the city
Since we're working
council,
on a budget for next year.
Since this is in first reading, we can do that. We can report back on
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Director Cook, would you like to come forward?
We have looked at the advertising costs, and those will be added to the cost of an application. So previously, the Design Review Board did not, if you were applying for a Design Review Board application, you didn't have to pay an advertising fee. So now that advertising fee will be added, and it's about $200 per application. So it'll be added to that application fee.
How many do we typically have in an annual?
So we get about 10 Design Review Board applications per month, and we're going to look at some, we're also talking to Molly about some changes in order to help some of the small businesses that will be applying for a sign permit. Usually that can be heard within 30 days, but with the new state law, it'll be 2 months. So we'll be looking at some things that may help in the interim with that process so that they're not impacted. Maybe it's a longer banner. We're looking at different things that can help the small businesses.
Okay, because I am concerned about the impact, fiscal and otherwise, to some of the applicants in these cases.
Yes, and that's what we found after the Planning Commission meeting. We started talking to Molly about what would be the impact if there was a deferral or a postponement, and then they would have to be re-advertised another 30 days. So we said, wait, maybe we don't want what we had brought to the Planning Commission. We'd rather be more lenient and only have the 15-day instead of 30 days if it's postponed or deferred. But there isn't anything that we can do to make it easier on the advertising for the Design Review Board, but we will look at possible extensions of banners, things like that, and bring that back to the council for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor,
Any
if
other-
I can add something, I've realized I forgot to mention.
You have the floor.
So she's mentioned the Design Review Board, which is another ordinance. It's not technically in the Unified Development Code, so that'll be what I present on next. But this does affect the Historic Preservation Commission, so that is included in the UDC revisions. One of perhaps an unintended consequence, it's not necessarily clear, when the variance was added and the quasi-judicial decisions were added to the to the ZPL, it captured some things that, again, had never been captured before, variances definitely being one of them, but decisions like of the Design Review Board and of the Historic Preservation Commission are likewise implicated. And so we can't do the 15 days notice for the Historic Preservation Commission or the Design Review Board, but they are now going to be subject to those requirements.
So I've just got another question that your comments have prompted. Some of our ordinances allow a director to have certain flexibility in variances and granting variances to a certain percent. Does this legislation impact that ability?
That's a great question. I think a strict reading of what a quasi-judicial officer is would include Director Cook if she were to make an administrative variance ruling. We have accounted for that in the ordinance because you have the opportunity for an appeal of an administrative decision. And so when there is an appeal of an administrative decision under the UDC, we provide the same notice and hearing that we would for any other quasi-judicial decision. And that is intended to provide that notice and opportunity to be heard for the citizens. That's how we've seen other jurisdictions handling it as well. That, I will say, I think is the best way to address that. But we've seen lots of jurisdictions across the state wrestling with that exact question.
Okay, thank you.
Director Cook, sorry. Just a quick question. Do you have, and I don't think I heard it, so I'm going to ask it. Hopefully it's not repetitive. Do you have any preference on which ordinance you would prefer to operate under, either the legislative and quasi-judicial one or the quasi-judicial only? Is there a preference for your department?
Just only. We don't want to make it stricter than what the state is requiring. So
Okay.
just the requirements that the state is
Okay.
is requiring.
Thank you.
Councilman Binder?
Well, you all answered the original question I had, but since everyone's up here, one question that we've come across, especially in the bigger applications, if they say between, have before council, they make changes to their application between planning commission and council. And at what time is that like a resubmittal versus, okay, they've evolved, evolved per se, their application? What are the flags for making it so it has to be like a resubmission?
Sure. We have to make sure that it meets that legal advertisement, so if they increase density and we have to re-advertise, then it would have to be a resubmittal. They wouldn't be able to move forward if it doesn't meet that legal advertisement. Now, if you're asking if an application changes between the Planning Commission and City Council based on comments they heard from the Planning Commission, we still move that forward. It just depends on how much it changes. If it's a significant change,
Like a change.
we'd bring it back
I
to the
definitely know
planning
the
commission.
density, but the change in use, so like the retail versus office.
Then
that's
that
been a
would
big
have to
battle.
be re-advertised and possibly brought back to the Planning Commission.
And is that codified, or is that kind of just a process that we have, internal process?
It's just an internal process, because you have to make sure that when an item is heard, that the public knows what's being heard. So you have to make sure that that legal ad meets what you're presenting to the public.
If at all possible, while we're looking at it, I think that might at least more publicly be stated so we all understand. Because I even know amongst commissioners and council members, it's like, okay, where is that? Then we can maybe make that part of this process improvement right now. Maybe not codified, but at least where it is a public document or as such.
And when staff gets an application, we have to write the legal ad. So we're also interpreting when it comes back if it still meets that legal ad to move forward.
Any other questions from council? Thank you, Ms. Cook. Ms. Eswine? Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on this matter, now is your opportunity. Seeing none, we'll close public. This is public comment regarding this item. Don't apologize. That's quite all right. I try not to blast everybody's ears out. I'm getting used to the new system here. But we do have public comment for open comments at the end of the city council meeting regarding any subject, but we try to stay focused on the items at hand. You're quite welcome. Thanks for coming this evening. I believe you said there were no public comment cards? However, I'm seeing no one else come forward, so we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, I have a motion tonight to approve PH-23-08 UDC text amendment zoning procedures laws as presented this evening.
May I get clarification? Is that motion for the minimum of
Minimum.
what's?
Yes,
Thank you.
the minimum.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel and a second by Councilman Mitchell. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously. So the next item up under public hearing will be PH-23-09, Alpharetta Design Review Board Ordinance and Design Guidelines Text Amendment, Zoning Procedures Law. Once again, Ms. Eswine, you have the floor.
Thank you. An ordinance of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, to amend Division 2 of Article 2 of Chapter 36 of the Code of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, to amend procedures to ensure consistency with the zoning procedures law, to repeal conflicting ordinances, to provide for an effective date, and for other lawful purposes. So as I had previously mentioned, the changes to the zoning procedures law went beyond just the typical zoning decisions, and that included certain administrative type decisions and use permits, which ultimately ends up capturing the decisions of the Design Review Board. And so while that is, related to land use, it doesn't fall under the UDC. It's a separate ordinance, and so that's why you're hearing it separately. The changes to this were fairly minimal, but they may be fairly significant. And so please know that we had to do this, but developers are basically encountering this across the board. Homeowners, anybody who's affected by design review boards are encountering this across the state, just like they are with the changes that you heard related to the UDC. For instance, Milton is having to change their design review board process as well to comply. So one thing, and probably the largest distinction, is that previously when someone made an application to the DRB, it would be heard and a decision made ideally within 30 days. So they were heard within 30 days. But as you just heard from me, now we have to advertise with notice being provided for at least 30 days. And so that's significantly going to delay when the DRB hears these applications. We also had to go ahead and add in the same public hearing procedures into the DRB that we did into the UDC, though I don't think that that's really going to change the timing so much. That just means 10 minutes per side, the applicants and any opponents. But that 30 days where they were getting a decision possibly in 30 days now is going to have a 30-day advertising, and that's what Director Cook was talking about with, if there's any deferment, what that might look like. So on Friday, I actually went to the DRB meeting, spoke to them during their work session, and explained all of that to them. They certainly can still defer applications. It's just going to be, beneficial if they really dig in and can sort out any issues. If they don't want to delay applications significantly, if they can do that on the front end, but they absolutely still can defer, consider things further if they need to. It's just going to mean that we would have to re-advertise if they're going to have a subsequent public hearing. So the changes also included the UDC had one provision related to the DRB that I failed to mention, and that had to do with that appeal procedure. So we've added in basically who's authorized to accept service for the DRB into the UDC rather than putting it in the DRB ordinance, and that's just the chairperson's authorized to accept that. That's a requirement under the state law as well.
Thank you, Ms. Eswine. Councilman Hypes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What is entailed with minimum threshold advertising? What's the minimum requirement? I know 30 days, but is it just publication X number of times in a newspaper? Is it yellow roadside signage?
There's no signage required for this. Signage is...
And by the way, if you would address this in the previous text amendment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
So signage is not changing. Signage is required only for the zoning of a property by an applicant who's not the city. And so that is not changing. But for the advertising, it's not just that we put it on our website. That's not lawful. It's going to be the same as what we do for zoning. So we have to say basically what the application is. We would include a summary generally, the location of the property. We would describe the property, and we'd give notice that the hearing would be before whatever body it is. So in this case, it would be the DRB, and when that hearing is going to be. So time, date, and place, explaining that. And that has to run in a newspaper, general circulation within the city, at least 30 days prior to the hearing. So I think we have a deadline of getting ads to the paper a week and a day beforehand. So say someone came in and applied on July 1st, we'd have a week and a day before the publication date that we'd have to get to the newspaper. And then that publication date would have to be 30 days before the meeting. So you submit it on July 1st, we send it to the paper that day. It's not going to get published until, let's assume, that July 8th is a publication day. You wouldn't be able to hear it within the month of July. It would have to go to an August meeting date in order to have that 30 days. It's not that you have to publish it multiple times in the newspaper. It can be just one time, but it has to be 30 days before the hearing. You can certainly do more if you want, but it's not required.
Councilman Mitchell?
Can you give us a little historic context for this, all the changes that are being made? Is this the construction and building trade that's putting pressure on the legislature?
Not necessarily. So I had mentioned during the prior presentation that there were some changes, ambiguities in case law as to how you are to appeal, and that's really what got this going. And that's not just the building industry. Anybody who applies for zoning is going to come before you, get a decision, they may be unhappy with it, and then they might want to sue. And the question is, how do they sue you? Is it a declaratory judgment? Is it a writ of cert? Is it injunctive relief? What is the remedy? How do you do it? And so that question is what precipitated all of this. The courts, several years ago, it's a case called Diversified, kind of called that into question. There's some differing of opinion on how to interpret that. Court of Appeals and Supreme Court have been looking at it. We're waiting on that to be finally sorted. And what happened is the legislature decided, okay, we're going to try and settle this ourselves. And so in the zoning procedures law, they actually said a zoning decision is appealed by review directly. That the court would hear the appeal, would get to hear any evidence that was relevant. Quasi-judicial decisions, you've heard me say that. Those are appealed on the record, where any evidence that is submitted to you is what the court gets to base their decision on. You don't go through discovery in the same way that you would. And so when the legislature was looking at that question and how, frankly, it's been a question across the state for a few years now, they decided to take this up, and in so doing decided, okay, we're going to provide some enhanced notification to citizens who might want to provide input on these applications.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Thank you, Ms. Eswine. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if you'd like to come forward and speak on this matter, now's your chance. I'm not sure you're familiar with this, but please state your name and address for the record.
Mayor and City Council, my name is Richard Kramer. I reside at 193 Lantern Ridge Court, Alpharetta, Georgia. I'm currently the chairman of the Alpharetta Design Review Board and have served on the board for now 27 years. So I've seen a little bit in that time frame. What's going into effect actually has some good and bad to it, so to speak. So the bad is I think applications or applicants now have to wait a little bit longer before they submit and get in front of the Design Review Board, for instance. So instead of being less than 30 days now, it's going to be greater than 30 days. But the good side of that may be is that some of the applications that we see, they're not quite ready for us to review them. They don't have all their information together. And I think Mr. Binder can attest to this from being on the Design Review Board. They're not necessarily, they don't have their information all together. This will give them a little additional time to pull that, whether it's material samples or correct some drawings or bring in some other things for us to see. So it actually has some good and bad impacts to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your service to our community. If there's no one else that wants to come forward, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I'd offer a motion this evening to approve first reading of PH-23-09, Alpharetta Design Review Board Ordinance and Design Guidelines Text Amendment Zoning Procedures Law on the minimal. Is that how we're going to say it?
There's no need on this one, but thank you.
All right, thank you.
Second.
Have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, a second by Councilman Dorito. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve as outlined by Mayor Pro Tem, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously. So the next item up is the public hearing on the fiscal year 2024 budget and millage rate levy. Director Harris, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the third of three advertised public hearings in accordance with state law. Later, I think immediately after this is the second reading of the budget ordinance and the second reading of the millage rate ordinance. Again, the public hearing is just to make sure we comply with state law, that we give an opportunity for the public to announce any issues they have on the budget.
Thanks, sir. Any questions from council? Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
No, Mr. Mayor, we do not.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak at this time, now's your opportunity. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. There is no vote on this item, as we outlined before. Is there anything else we need to do, Ms. Eswine?
No, I think we're going to adopt at the next item under new business.
Just wanted to make sure I was following state law and going through this process. Thank you. That'll wrap up our public hearing portion this evening. Move on to new business, and the first item of new business is the fiscal year 2024 budget ordinance. This is the second reading. Ms. Eswine, if you will please read the ordinance, and then I'll turn the floor over to Director Harris.
An ordinance of the Mayor and Council of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, adopting the final estimates of revenue and expenditures for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2023, and ending on June 30th, 2024, as its annual budget, appropriating the use of funds shown therein as may be needed or deemed necessary to defray all expenditures and liabilities of the city for such fiscal year, providing an effective date and further purposes.
Thank you, ma'am. Director Harris, it's all yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, this is the second reading of the budget ordinance, and I guess I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the direction of Chris Lagerbloom, our city administrator, as well as each of you and our directors who worked to put this all together. Pretty over an extended period of time, but I think it's a good budget. Hopefully you do as well, and that's all I have.
Any questions for Director Harris? You've done a great job in this new budget process, and I think it's been much more collaborative. I appreciate your efforts on this item. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward, now is your opportunity to do so. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir. I move that we approve the City of Alpharetta's fiscal year 2024 budget ordinance as read by Ms. Eswine.
Have a motion by Councilman Binder, a second by Councilman Will, and that was to approve the budget ordinance as outlined by Ms. Eswine. Any discussion? Councilman Dorito.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Harris. And I'd like, Mr. Harris, I want to take this opportunity to first and foremost thank you, Tom, you and your staff, all our department directors. Much thanks to the mayor and Jason Binder, Councilman Binder, who's our liaison to finance. This is a great budget. When you look at the economy that we're operating under here in Alpharetta and around the country right now, to be able to pass a budget like this that supports our public safety, and continues to invest in public safety, continues to invest in infrastructure improvements, continues to, I would say, greatly continues to invest in stormwater management for the city, and also, you know, protects our biggest asset. That's our almost 468 employees that we rely on daily to, you know, not only protect us, take care of city services, and basically create the city that we all love and operate in every day with our families and our friends and visitors. It's a great honor to support this budget because of that, and also thank the taxpayer for supporting what we do here in Alpharetta. But I thank all my colleagues on the council. This has been a team effort since our retreat, and Mr. Lagerlund, you as well, for helping lead the discussions on the budget and the public hearings. Not many cities can do what we're doing here tonight in supporting not only increases in the budget, but taking care of our professional staff as far as maintaining some sense of level of competition against the inflations that all families are feeling in the marketplace today. So thank you very much.
All those in favor of the motion to approve the fiscal year 2024 budget as outlined by Councilman Binder, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously. Well done, gentlemen. So the next item up is the fiscal year 2024 millage rate ordinance. This is also the second reading, and Ms. Eswine, you once again have the floor for reading the ordinance.
An ordinance of the mayor and the council of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, to fix the ad valorem tax rate of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024, and for other purposes.
Thank you very much. Director Harris? Nothing to add?
Ditto.
Councilman Hypes has a question for you, so you won't get off that easy.
Director Harris, if you know, how many years or when did we start with the 5.75 millage rate? Was it 2012
It was
or earlier?
at least, yeah, that or earlier. I would say it's probably earlier.
So it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 to 13 years without a rate increase in the city of Alpharetta.
Correct.
And going back to when that last rate increase took place, our budget in terms of serving the city and number of employees, number of miles of roads that we have to resurface and maintain, sidewalks that we build and now maintain, the sewer system, stormwater system, I should say, our policing, that's all grown almost exponentially, hasn't it?
Correct, yes.
So for our taxpayers, we have a much more populated, dense city, somewhat more urbanized city, somewhat more complex city, but we've not raised our tax rate throughout that time, at least 11 to 13 years.
Yes, that is correct. And additionally, we actually had some homestead exemptions.
You beat me to it. And we've granted homeowner relief over that time as well. So, good job, Mr. Harris. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks to all of you.
Any other questions from council? Thanks, sir. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, now's your chance to come forward if you'd like to speak. Seeing none, we will close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir. I move to approve the City of Alpharetta's fiscal year 2024 millage rate ordinance.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilman Binder, a second by Councilman Heips. Any discussion? I think they've pretty much covered it, but I am very appreciative to the efforts of our staff to make sure that we get best value we possibly can for the services and infrastructure we provide. It doesn't happen just by chance, and it's a culture that's been built out over the decades. We appreciate Mr. Lagerbloom continuing those efforts, and we look forward to doing the same, to continue to return a great return on the tax dollars and minimize the impact to our residents. That being said, all those in favor of approving the fiscal year 2024 millage rate ordinance, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously. Next item up is the resolution approval of the fiscal year 2024 City Council priorities and annual action plan. Ms. S. White, once again, you have a resolution to read.
A resolution by the mayor and the council of the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, to adopt the fiscal year 2024 city council priorities and annual action plan.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lagerbloom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So this is a process that started this year for the first time. It's one I'd like for us to continue. We'll sort of get into that ebb and flow of a routine budget process. During your annual retreat, we talked about priorities and top priorities. We landed on what those were as far as the top 10. This tonight just affirms that you all agreed that these are our top 10 priorities for the year. You'll start to see these embedded in the work that we do, the reports that we give to you, how we report on our progress with the budget that you've just adopted, and I appreciate that adoption tonight. So a lot of what we do is going to be focused on making sure that it is in advancing of your priorities. And so just running through those real quick as top priorities, just as a reminder, you all picked strategic growth and redevelopment, safe and welcoming community, the Alpha Loop and Greenway, downtown Alpharetta, and what we termed communications that connect. With respect to priorities and also focus of the city in this document is recreation, parks and culture, infrastructure and facilities maintenance, transportation and traffic, people-focused workforce, and you all did a lot to advance that tonight, and I do appreciate that as well. And economic development, all good things for the city of Alpharetta. This really does nothing more than just affirms by resolution that you all are saying as collectively as a group, these are priorities and top priorities of the city, and direct us to work in ways that advance these priorities on your behalf, and then we will report back to you our progress. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments from council? Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone would like to come forward, now's your chance. Seeing none, we will close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir. I move that we I move that we approve the fiscal year 2024 city council priorities and annual action plan.
Have a motion by Councilman Binder and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, and that was to approve the annual action plan ordinance or resolution as outlined by Molly Eswine. Any discussion?
Yes.
Councilman Binder.
Mr. Lagerboom, I think this is a fantastic right step, that one I've been kind of crying for, and glad that we got this through on this budget season. Would love to see how we add more of the numbers to the bullet points. We have a CIP that I'm looking at has 15 million in hopes and dreams, and I'm pretty sure we probably can double that in actuality of what we're really planning for. So it's incumbent on us to keep reaching for the stars, but have a financial roadmap to do that. So, thank you.
Any other comments? All those in favor of passing this resolution, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously. So the next item up will be the contract award, RFP number 23-112, Design Services, Woodbridge Park Sanitary Sewer. Director Sasevich, let's talk sewers.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is a design services for the Woodbridge Park Sanitary Sewer project. It is a design services contract. We are piggybacking on Fulton County, who has went through an extensive process to shortlist vendors for them. We contacted all those vendors. We received proposals from only two, Prime Engineering and Benchmark, and Prime Engineering had the lowest cost as well as a comparable duration of the project to take place. It's going to be about 5 months to complete the work. In preparation of all this, we also contracted with our on-call surveying firm, so they are in the process of surveying the property right now, so when the contract is executed, we're ready to go. So this is critical to be done in association with putting in a new sewer line so that we could put in an artificial turf over at Woodbridge Park.
Thanks, sir. Any questions from City Council on this item? Councilman Will.
Director Sissetovich, just out of curiosity, when you did these first two, and I'm just asking a question because I read this earlier, it said that Prime came back cheaper but took significantly longer, but now you're saying it was exactly the same. Did you correct that time gap
Yes.
in the negotiation phase?
So there was a lot of unknowns of Prime with our process of how we do our permitting and how we work with the vendors. And we also worked with Fulton County and figure out what their time frame was as well for their review process.
So they adjusted it down to what we needed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, sir.
However, now's your chance if you'd like to come forward. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mayor. I move to approve the award RFP number 23-112 for Woodbridge Park Sanitary Sewer Design Services to Prime Engineering, Inc., in an amount not to exceed $67,245, and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Second.
That was a motion by Councilman Dorito, a second by Councilman Binder, and that was for the RFP 23-112 as outlined in the motion by Councilman Dorito. Any discussion? Councilman Binder?
Pete, just thank you to you and your crew and Morgan. I know when we do these big capital projects, you're kind of wondering if you're going to, what's a mystery box you're going to open up there, and this one definitely was the case. You guys did it quickly. You communicated well with the group. You got a lot of nervous soccer organization and parents there and everything, so they were happy to see the flags go up and seeing that we were mapping it out. So appreciate what you guys did.
Thank you very much. I'll pass it on.
Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Pete. We appreciate your efforts, as always. Next item is the invitation to bid 23-007, City Center Parking Garage Maintenance and Repairs.
Yes, like all of our facilities, we have maintenance programs to work through. We hire consultants. This time it was West Jennings to do an inspection of the parking deck over at City Center and come back with the results, and then develop a set of plans that we could bid out. And we had 3 firms submit pricing. Metro Waterproofing was the low bid at $85,475. And primarily what we're doing is we're taking care of all the joints, we're sealing them, we're putting lubricants in. We're also going to seal over the restroom facility. So if you ever drive on the second and third floor, you'll see that there's a different color of the parking deck. That is a waterproof coating for the restrooms. So that will be done as well. There'll be phasing going on. So it's a 5-week process, but they'll be closing certain spaces periodically over the next 5 weeks.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from council on this item? Councilman Will, and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Just out of curiosity, you've got a bid of 85, a bid of 123, and a bid of 148. In your professional opinion, what's the difference in those bids?
It's overhead right now,
Overhead?
labor overhead.
How can somebody do it for 85 if somebody else is at 150?
Excuse me?
How can one person do it at 85 if another bid's at 150?
Metro is doing more performing other work. They're not contracting anything out.
So you're saying they're doing it in-house as opposed to subcontracting?
Yes, sir.
So Resticon might be subcontracting it to Metro?
It's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Who did the work over at the other parking deck by the cemetery? It was the same thing, right?
It's very similar. Yeah, I can't recall. I'm sorry.
They didn't bid on this work?
They did not bid on this work.
Okay. How were you satisfied with what they did over there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions from council? Councilman Dorito.
Pete, just a quick question. I think recently we just had that deck power wash, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the question would be, if you said no, I was going to raise the question of waterproofing versus getting that done first before you waterproof, because I think it would be
So this is the
counterproductive by power washing after the fact, right?
It's preventative maintenance is what we're doing. So
Okay.
there are no issues right now. What we're doing is trying to get on a cycle so that we never have any issues.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
Ms. Shapiro. Public comment cards?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Now's your chance if you want to. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mayor. Move to award the contract for city center parking, garage maintenance and repairs, ITB 23-007 to Metro Waterproofing, Inc., in the amount not to exceed $85,475, and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
I have a motion by Councilman Dorito, a second by Councilman Will, and that was to approve the bid for 23-007 as outlined by Councilman Dorito. Any discussion? Thanks, Pete. Appreciate you maintaining things so we don't have to rebuild them later. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And it does pass unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor Council.
Thank you. Next item up under new business is hold harmless and release agreement with Hasbrook Heights Board of Education, City of Alpharetta. Director Robison.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For a second year in a row, after a very successful trial last summer, we're going to be going up to New Jersey again, Hasbrook Heights, for a recruiting trip. This time we're actually doing police and 911. And just as last year, we are utilizing a high school gym up there. One of the schools is being nice enough to let us use that week, and therefore we need to get approval from you for a hold harmless agreement regarding the PT test and other events we'll be doing up there.
Thanks, sir. Any questions from council on this item? Councilman Will.
Chief Robinson, did we do a hold harmless and release last year when we did that?
We did.
We did? Okay, I just don't remember doing it.
I believe we did. Didn't we, Molly? We did.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. I appreciate your efforts on doing this again. Will prove fruitful, I'm sure. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
Not for this item, sir.
But if anyone else would like to come forward, now's your chance. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve the hold harmless and release agreement between the City of Alpharetta, Georgia and the Board of Education of Hasbrook Heights.
I have a motion by Councilman Will, second by Councilman Dorito. Any discussion? Once again, congratulations on being innovative and our opportunities to find excellent public safety employees. All those in favor of the motion to approve the hold harmless agreement as outlined by Councilman Will, please raise your right hand. It does pass unanimously. So that'll wrap up the new business portion of tonight's meeting, and we have arrived at the portion of our meeting where we'll accept public comment. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, our only comment card that we have this evening is for Hugh Hawley on Margin Way. If you'll come forward, just state your name and address for the record, please, sir. And generally, we keep our comments to around 3 minutes.
How many?
3 minutes, sir.
3 minutes.
Yes.
Got to be quick. Good morning, Mayor and Council. I've never been before a council or before because I've always lived in the county. So,
welcome to Alpharetta.
I'm glad to be here. It took us 2 years to find the place we wanted. We think place is just marvelous. My wife loves it, and we gave up a beautiful place on the lake to come here because we thought it was a great place to live. So.
We won't count that on your time.
I'm here because I have a real concern about safety, and I saw 2024, y'all are emphasizing safety in the city. I live in the core of the city, and to be honest with you, I sort of consider that the city, and then I get out and I see how far the city really runs. Okay. But my issue is, since I've lived in the city at 3 intersections, I've almost been run over 10 or 12 times. And I talked to the staff about this and met with them to show them my concerns about 6 months ago. I've only been here 10 months. So, and this all came to a head within the last 3 weeks or so when my family and I almost got run over 3 times in a week, almost within a 48-hour period on Roswell Street. My background is risk management. I have 2 advanced degrees from Florida, one from Florida State and one from Georgia State in risk management and insurance, and have handled 300 architect and engineering firms in Georgia for over 40 years. So I'm not an engineer and I'm not an architect, but I've dealt with them in their trials and tribulations for that period. In my opinion, the city has created a hazard at the intersections of Maid and Roswell Street and the intersection at Roswell Street and Old Roswell. What someone did is split that intersection. I've never seen a split crosswalk, where when you're crossing the street, you get a blinking sign for the first half of your walk, and then there's no blinking sign in the other half of the walk, separately at each of those 2 locations. So it leaves you exposed. I was coming back about 1:30 in the afternoon with my 4-year-old granddaughter, and almost got hit crossing the road there by the other party who had stopped for someone else to cross. But they didn't think they didn't think they needed to stop for me when I was crossing at Old Roswell and Roswell because I was in front of them. But both of the signs go off at the same time. In my opinion, it would be safer if you would either decide to do away with one of those crosswalks or add the proper signage at both of those crosswalks. When I go down Roswell Street, I went to your meeting on South Main thinking that y'all would be discussing Roswell Street down around Marietta Street and Roswell Street, which is where I live. That has to be one of the most dangerous intersections because cars are coming over a hill. They have limited sight distance. There's no flashing signs. The city installed flashing signs to remind the drivers to stop at the stop signs on Marietta Street, but there's no flashing sign for the pedestrians to notify the drivers coming over that hill that you're standing there. So you're standing there, and at night and late in the day, there's very little light down there. There's one little light hanging up there. So we really do need some signage down there. And I know staff has mentioned to me that we're doing that intersection there, but safety, safety in life-threatening situations is really not something to put off. And I wouldn't like to be hit. I don't think you would like to be hit. And I know it's difficult. I think the rest of the city is great. I'm a walker. I've crossed every crosswalk you have, because I would have walked here tonight, but I thought it was going to rain. I just feel like that area, from a lighting standpoint, a streetscape standpoint coming down, it's either been overlooked or you got it in a plan I'm not aware of, and I'll try to find out from your staff, but that is a very unsafe area. And I suggest if you're not too busy the next week or so, you walk down there and you'll get a real experience crossing those two intersections. And I thank you for your considerations, and congratulations on a great city. And I found out after I started looking at one of my largest clients is Smallwood Rentals, so I did see them on your marquee out front. They're a great firm, and whoever did this did a great job. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. And so I'll just mention on behalf of our council, we understand the challenges that we face. It's not going to be a question back and forth, so I'll try to speak up louder. We're aware that there are challenges in downtown pedestrian. We've invested a tremendous amount of time, energy, and money trying to address those, and we'll continue to work with it. I'll invite our Public Works Director to come up and speak to some of the challenges. The challenge we have is that 10 years ago, when I first joined this council, we didn't have this problem. Those roads were designed decades ago when there was not a huge traffic issue. There were not a lot of traditional pedestrian traffic downtown. And so I'm not making excuses, I'm just explaining why these particular areas are still challenges. Is you've got a much larger, vibrant downtown where the roads were not constructed based on engineering practices that we use nowadays. Right. And so trying to retrofit specifically those areas of concern for you, we've been talking about for years, and we'll continue to do so until we find some solutions. It's not because it's not important, it's not because it's not a priority, it's because typically anywhere in that corridor you specifically mentioned, to do anything to make it safer one way, you make it less safe other ways. And that may be the car traffic, because there is tremendous car traffic through that pedestrian corridor.
Well, there are a couple of cheap fixes, I think, again, I mentioned those flashing stop signs for 3,500-pound cars to tell them to stop.
Like I said, this isn't a back and forth. What I'll do is ask our Public Works Director is to come up and address that corridor and some of the things that he is currently reviewing and take into consideration any thoughts he has on your suggestion.
Before James puts up that drawing, Roswell Street at Old Roswell Street, the Maid intersection, we still only have one crosswalk. And we had only one crosswalk because of the sight distance challenges. And we received a litany of complaints, and people were jaywalking, and so we...
If I can interrupt, are you able to hear him now?
No, I can't hear him.
Okay. Could you please speak up, Pete?
So at the Old Roswell Street intersection, we had only one crosswalk. And that was because of the sight distance and the hill. We had lots of complaints. People were jaywalking. Public safety was watching it for us, and we decided to put another crosswalk up there just so we get some people's attention. But James has a PDF. So this is Roswell Street corridor. This is a T-Splosh 2 project that we're working on right now. We're in the middle of the design phase, and it was considered initially a Roswell Street, Marietta Street safety improvement project. The idea was originally going to go to a raised intersection, but engineering-wise, we cannot ramp down in time before you bottom out, making a right-hand turn onto Cotton Alley there, which takes you to the townhome complex. So it's a hazard there. So we are proposing rapid flashing beacons, at the intersection. Also recall, this is where the downtown Alpha Loop is. So on the south side, or the east side of the intersection, bottom of the page, is the Alpha Loop, which is a 12-foot wide trail. We're going to have some landscaping as planned as well. And one thing you do notice on this conceptual plan that's being engineered right now is that there are no left turn lanes at that intersection. Marietta Street had left turn lanes, so you had 36 feet of asphalt you were crossing. So we've reduced that down to the 24 feet, 23 feet, make it safer for pedestrians to get through. Also give a landing area for the pure taqueria delivery vehicles in that Gore area, as well as keep some parallel parking. So things are being worked on. It's a T-Splosh 2 project, and we'll be bringing it forward for out to bid here, hopefully in the next couple months.
Thank you, Pete. Sir, were you able to hear any of that?
I did, but I didn't know if he was going to address the signage issue. I understand that map very well.
I tell you what, my name's Jim Gilvin. I'm the mayor. If you'll send me an email at jgilvin@alpharetta.ga.us, you can find it on our website. We'll make sure to have a one-on-one with you and any of your neighbors that want to have those conversations. Fair enough, Pete? Okay. Thank you, sir. We do appreciate you moving to Alpharetta and coming to speak to us. Any other public comment cards, Ms. Shapiro?
No, Mr. Mayor, that's it.
However, if anyone would like to come forward, now's your chance. Seeing none, we will close public comment. Do we have any reports this evening? Councilman Will, then Councilman Hipes.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to make note, let everybody know, and put on the record that the city of Alpharetta does have a brand-new, soon-to-be best-selling author, our Director of Public Safety, also known as Dr. John Robison. His new book is on pre-order right now. It's called Compelling Force Leadership: How Leaders Can Use Their Influence to Effectively Lead People with Purpose and Passion. I can tell you I've actually gone through the manuscript prior to the release. It's a good book. And I just want everybody to know that they should pick that thing up because there's a lot of wisdom in there. And good luck with the book, John.
Councilman Hipes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We continue to have very busy and eventful summer thanks to the Department of Fun, Rex Park, and cultural events. And for the upcoming week, we have Food Truck Alley will be coming up on Old Roswell Street, 5 to 9. Bring a blanket chair and your appetite. And then we have Art in the Park this Saturday and Sunday, June 24 and 25. That's going to be right back here in Brook Street Park. And that's from 9 to 4 on Saturday and from 12 to 4 on Sunday. Our Equestrian Center, I saw some trailers pulling in front of my, I was out in front of my office, so the horses and equestrians are coming in. The Elite Jumping Show will be at the Wills Park Equestrian Center Saturday and Sunday, June 24 and 25. And lastly, over at the Alpharetta Arts Center, this Saturday, June 24th, the pianos that you see around town are from Play It Again Pianos, and there's a new piano being placed out in front of the Arts Center by Play It Again Pianos. It's being dedicated. It's called Mrs. Jean, and they're going to dedicate that this Saturday, 5 to 5:30, and from 5 to 7 at the Arts Center, there'll be a celebration gallery exhibit and reception inside. So lots of things happening. That's just the tip of the iceberg, but that's a few announcements from Parks and Rec.
Thanks, sir. That's outstanding. There's no other reports. We'll wrap up reports, and I don't believe there's any executive session since this morning's meeting. So I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Councilman Mitchell, motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, I'll give it to him on the second. All those in favor of adjourning, raise your right hand. And it is unanimous. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Mayor and council, I am